In 1966, a British girl named Jackie had a serious problem. God had spoken clearly to her, telling her to go, but he hadn't told her where. So she got on a ship that was headed toward Japan, believing that God would tell her where to get off. When her ship pulled into port in Hong Kong, she knew that she had arrived at the destination God had chosen for her. And her mission field soon became even more specific: the walled city. It was a place of horrors. Sewage running through the streets, rampant prostitution, pornography, and drug use. Neither the Chinese or the British were willing to take responsibility for the walled city, so it was overrun with lawlessness, poverty, and debauchery. No wonder the Chinese called it Hak Nam, City of Darkness. In today's show, we'll review Jackie's autobiography, Chasing the Dragon. That's what's coming up on this episode of the Pure Life Ministries Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Here we go. Okay, so this is another episode in our series, Why You Should Read, and this was started, probably a couple of years ago. We reviewed Amy Carmichael's autobiography or biography. And it's just one of those things that we like to do periodically because I know that Pastor Steve has mentioned to us how much reading biographies has blessed his faith. I know it has helped me tremendously, just reading the biographies of Christians who have gone before, seeing the struggles, seeing the victories, seeing the power of God at work in people's lives. It's just like, it's like one more of those, the cloud of many witnesses from Hebrews 12, right? Like here's Jackie Pullinger. We're going to go through Chasing the Dragon by Jackie Pullinger, and she's just one more of those cloud of witnesses saying, I've lived by faith, God's been faithful, follow me as I follow Christ. It's just really encouraging. So anyway, I don't know, before we get into some of the specific points about her life, what were the things that helped you from this book or just your takeaways?
It helped me to see that it doesn't matter how dark things look, like the Lord sees it, and the Lord is drawn to need wherever it is and whatever the situation is. Like throughout the book, it's just the walled city that she goes to. It's just, there's no light in that place. It's just a totally dark place, but like the Lord is like right there. He has people that he wants to save in there, and he sends Jackie to go there, and it's just the heart of God. It's just like he saves to the uttermost, and like where she went was like the uttermost, and that was just a really amazing picture of just the deep heart of God and just how merciful he really is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When I was reading it, first thing that stood out was how absolutely candid, open, and honest she was. I was like, wow, like she is literally telling you what's going on in her inside world. And some of it, you're like, wow, that's really like, I don't know how to say it, but it's real. It's how she was really feeling in the moment, her emotions, everything that was going on, positive or negative. She was just very open and honest. And I think that kind of spoke to me in a way of like, God used her. Sometimes you read biographies and you're like, this person was an absolute saint. And there was nothing wrong, and they did everything perfect. Right. It just feels that way, even though, because sometimes they're just not going into that detail. Right. But Jackie does. And so I think of like, she wasn't this amazing speaker who just knew how to use her words to persuade people. She wasn't this inspirational speaker that knew how to portray things so that people could get saved. God said, go here. She went, and wherever God told her to go, she went, and God used her. Yeah. And that's the type of person that the Lord uses. And so it kind of it encourages you, because sometimes you look at yourself and you're like, but I have wrong thinkings, I have wrong motives, the way that my inside world can sometimes be so negative and not always positive. So to see some of that happening in her life, but her continuing to be obedient to God regardless, this is what's really happening on the inside. But Lord, I know what you're asking me to do. Or he speaks to her and she follows him. That's what was the most important, was her obedience and her willingness to follow, even though her inside world was just like freaking out.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing she also said in the introduction to her book was that she started getting all of these requests that people would come and that people would say, please come and share your story. And she's like, man, that is not why I wrote this book. I didn't write this book to then come and talk about my story. I wrote this book so that you would go out and do what God is calling you to do. You know, so that when God tells you to go, you go. When God tells you to minister to so-and-so, you have the faith to believe that God will work in your life. And eventually, you write your own book, you know. And obviously, not everybody's going to write a book about their lives. But I thought that was really fascinating. Like, she didn't want anybody to look at her and say, wow, look at this amazing Christian. She just wanted other people to be inspired so that they would become like Jesus wherever they are. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'll say too that she had a willingness to humble herself when she had a differing viewpoint than others who were helping her out. She was very willing to voice her opinion, but also listen and also say, okay, yeah, you're right. I honor you. I'm respecting you, and you're right. I'm gonna do it your way. So she had that willingness, and that's a characteristic that God can really use, and that is looking for in so many people, to have these similar stories. Like you're saying, I want you to write your own book. Well, one of the ways that God really used her was because she was humble and she was willing to change her own thinking, her own methodology.
Yeah, so let's get into some of we are only going to be able to cover a tiny fraction of what is in this book, but
that's why you got to read the book.
Right, exactly. That's why you should read the book. She's a pretty remarkable woman. Her account of growing up was really fascinating because she she was kind of like two different people, it seemed like. On the one hand, she, even as a young girl, she had these pretty strong impressions of like, God is a righteous judge and I'm going to have to stand before him one day and I'm going to have to like give an account for how I lived, and I don't know how I'm going to answer because I'm not a good person. And this was like 4. She would say things like this, like, I'm not a good person. I want to be good, but I don't know how to be good. She also had a pretty amazing experience when she was 13. She was confirmed into the Church of England, and that experience for her was full of joy. Like, she had a real sense, I'm giving my life to God, and she received back from him this profound sense of joy that she wasn't experiencing. And yet, she went from that to, it seemed like, a place where she just pretty much forgot about God and was just living however she wanted to.
Yeah, I think she went to school for music. Apparently she's a great oboe player,
Yeah,
so
who knew?
So she would, she said something like she had a attraction to the brass section or something like that. So she'd hang out with like the tuba players, and they'd go after concerts to different bars and things like that. So you see her kind of going into that worldly lifestyle, but she said when she was in that, she was always looking for the man of her dreams, was basically what she was saying. And that never gave that to her. That environment never gave that to her. And she was talking with a couple of maybe some friends that she knew or something like that. And they said, well, come to this coffee shop and hear this guy talk about the Bible. And she gets there, and apparently the guy's attractive. I think she said that in there. He was a good looking guy. And they just talked about the Bible, but they were very normal people.
Yeah.
That's they were normal. And she felt very open and comfortable to talk about the Bible in that environment. And something happened to her in that changed her. And she was praying with these two girls, and they were all praying about how they're so happy that they're going to heaven. These two girls were. And something just hit her where she was like, well, if we're going to heaven and we know, that means that the converse is true, that people who don't know are going to hell. And there was this conflict inside of her of, okay, if we know that we're going to heaven and we know why, and there are people out there who are going to hell and they don't know, why are we so happy that we're going to, like something was in her that I think that was God reestablishing that call to missions back into her life.
Yeah, she just, like, one thing that was really interesting about her and probably good to know about her as you go through this book is, like, she hated anything, maybe hated's a strong word, but she was not attracted to anything that felt like dead religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when she would see people who claimed to be Christian, but they were sad or they were just very rigid and rules-oriented, she really rejected that. But when she met a group of Christians who were full of life and loved one another, she was like, oh, that actually was the thing that got her back to the place where she was even willing to start talking about God again.
Yeah.
Because these people there was a vibrancy. And that's what really she wanted she wanted a sense of mission. She wanted a sense of purpose. She wanted to live for God.
Yeah.
Not just be a Christian.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a dream that she had that really affected her. To your point, like, there's a woman in this dream, and she says, "What can you give us?" And this is Jackie's response. This is what she's thinking. She says, "What did I honestly think I could give her? If I was going to be a missionary, what was I going to give anyone? Was it my ability to play the piano and oboe? Was I to pass on the benefit of my nice English background or my education? Was I to be a channel for food or money or clothing? If I only gave her those things, then when I went away, she would be hungry again. But the woman in the picture had been hungry for a food she did not know about." And then she says, "Then it came to me that what she needed was the love of Jesus. If she received that, then when I left her, she would still be full, and even better, she would be able to share it with other people."
Yeah.
And so, that's her heart. And when you're saying, like, she like pushes against the dead religion, it's because she knows these people need Jesus. She knows that what she can offer amounts to nothing. Playing nice music, her nice English background, whatever, that's
right.
all going to fade away, whatever. But Jesus, he's eternal, and what he gives, that bubbling spring inside of us of his eternal life, that's what people need.
Yeah, so we're going to have to skip a bunch of time because the story around how she recognized her call to Hong Kong is amazing. But, we're not going to give everybody all the details because, again,
Gotta read the book.
you have to read the book. But anyway, so she ends up in Hong Kong, and this is back in the 60s, I think, the 1960s. She leaves England with a one-way ticket to some country. She doesn't even know where she's going. She doesn't know where God's called her. She just gets on a boat and gets off at Hong Kong and eventually feels led to start working in the walled city. And the walled city doesn't even exist anymore. I think she was instrumental in actually bringing down that whole thing. But anyway, so the walled city is a place of just, I don't even think that as Americans we can hardly comprehend what the walled city was actually like.
I was taken aback at her descriptions of what it actually was and the living conditions. It was, it was incredible.
She said, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's this small space that there's so many people living there that they have to build up because they can't build out. So they have to build up. So, I mean, like, she's talking about walking through the streets and there's no bathrooms. So people are dumping their
sewage
out the window. So you got to keep your eyes down
Streets, yeah.
so that you don't get hit in the face with this, but you could probably still get hit. And just how dark it was, like not dark in the sense of spiritual, it was spiritually dark, but just no light. Like you're walking down these dark alleyways. You don't know what you're stepping on. You don't know what, like it was, the amount of people in that small amount of space. I can't remember what she said.
I think
but
she said that one official count was 30,000 people in 6 square acres or something like that.
Something like
but
that.
But they assume that it's probably even higher than that, maybe even up to double that. Yeah, the reason why it's so dark is because light literally couldn't get through the spaces between the buildings. They were so tight together.
Yeah. And if people want to see what it looked like, there's that documentary, The Law of Love, I think is what it's called. And there's some scenes in there with it. And it's like, wow.
Yeah. Totally lawless place. Neither the British nor the Chinese would claim jurisdiction over the city, and so it was basically completely lawless. The police were afraid to go in there. So, I mean, really, the law of the land was crime. Violence, death, drugs, pornography. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah. Run by triads, I guess is what they're called, which is, it sounded like if your triad beat that triad, then you were the governing triad of the area. So there was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of lawlessness. There wasn't really any work to be done there. Like you couldn't just go work somewhere. If you did, you're probably working at a brothel, working at what they call blue film places, and all these different spots where that's where you worked, or, dumping people's sewage. I mean, it's just, that was work. And that it's just, a very dark place.
Yeah, and one of the big needs in that place was for some kind of youth work, because there was really nothing for the young people to do.
Yeah.
They were either completely, I mean, there's way too much to go into, all the dynamics. She was amazing at explaining what the problem was, but essentially there was nothing for youth to do except to become gang members. And part of being a gang member was most likely to be addicted to opium. And it was just a horrible, horrible place. And yet she said, like, every time I would go in, I would be filled with joy and the love of God. I remember her saying in one of her, it might have been one of the documentaries, where people would say, "Oh, I can't believe you would do this. You're such an amazing person, Jackie." And she's like, "I'm not an amazing person. To me, that place was like heaven, because all I could see was that some of those people could be redeemed." And I mean, that's an amazing thing. She said it wasn't a sacrifice at all to work there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one of the amazing things was that she explained that she started to feel something for these people that she'd never felt before, love, and that this was no longer about like what she could get from them. She was like obsessed with laying her life down on their behalf.
Yeah, I think there was one lady, I can't remember the whole exact story, but I'm pretty sure she was not living in the walled city at this point, or not ministering fully in the walled city. She was doing certain things, teaching here, teaching music here, teaching different places here, and she went to a church service. I believe it was in the walled city, and this lady came up to her and was just powerfully impacted and asked her, "Will you come next week?" And for Jackie, it was like, well, I got all this other stuff. I can't go to the walled city every Sunday.
Yeah,
Like, I
she
can't
had
do
no
that.
job. She had to make a living.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I can't just do this, but something in her like was compelled that she wanted to keep ministering to this woman and knew that this woman needed she needed the Lord.
Yeah.
And so she just outside of her better judgment, said, I'll be here next week. And that started a thing where she just kept going every single week. And so she started off kind of going once in a while, but I think, like, to your point, her love for these people just compelled her to say, I will do it, outside of her quote unquote better judgment.
Right.
Like, this is what seems right because I need money, I need a job. Something in love inside of her compelled her, I need to be there every single week. And she started going every single week.
Yeah.
Yeah, the love that came through her, it's unique to God because she didn't expect anything in return. I think, if I can say it like that. Like, she gave. There's this boy named Chanwo Sai, who she says it was as if God had given me a special love for him that I was meant to show it, although it was not necessarily an emotion that should or could be returned. This love was for his good. And it challenged me because I'm like, I do love my family. I love my friends and all that, but sometimes there's like this thing of like, well, what am I going to get in return?
Yeah.
And I think that's what was able to fuel her continuing going into that place, that it was like heaven for her, because it was like, she's not expecting anything in return. She's like, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to show the love of God no matter what. She had hard times, and she's human, but that's what fueled her, was this I'm just going to give and give and give and not expect anything in return.
Yeah. Yeah, and lest we paint some kind of picture that isn't realistic, like, that is definitely one thing that she talked about, was just this deep, almost compulsive kind of love, to lay her life down for other people. But there were other times where she was so candid, like you said, opening up, where she just laid it all on the line, the good, the bad, the ugly, of how she was responding to some of the trials.
Yeah, I remember at one point she blatantly tells God, do not send me another drug addict. I can't handle it. I can't keep pouring my life out for someone who doesn't change.
Right.
I can't keep doing this. Like, she tells God, don't send me another drug addict. Like, I'm done.
Right.
And then she gets on a bus and all she can see is drug addict, prostitute, this. And so she started seeing need again, but her heart at that moment was just like, God, I can't do this anymore.
Yep.
But that sight of the need was just like she knew, like, she couldn't just walk away.
Yeah.
Even though it was very difficult.
Yeah.
One
of the things that I thought was amazing about the book was that I think she had been ministering in the walled city. She had opened up a youth club so that youth could actually have a place to come besides just being in gangs or being in the drug dens or being at the porn shows or whatever. She wanted a place where they could come and do something constructive. I think she'd been ministering for at least several years. And she got to this point where she said, I've been pouring my life out for these people. I've been giving them my love. I've been giving them my time. I've been giving them my energy, and they're not changing. And she got to this point where it was almost like, what gives? What is going to make the difference? And she talked about how she felt that when she would look at the New Testament, like, she would see that there was a power that was working in Jesus. She said, Jesus didn't promise a lame man a pair of running shoes in the hereafter. Jesus made him walk. Yeah. And so she felt like, okay, I can't just preach like heaven to people or preach whatever. I need to they need to change now. Yep. And she didn't have any idea how to make that happen for them, though, because she had given it her best effort.
Yeah. So she goes to this service and she sees this Chinese couple who have that certain something that she feels like she's missing. So she approaches them and they flat out tell her, you need the Holy Spirit. So she gets a little like, of course I got the Spirit. What are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
You know, I have the Spirit. You're crazy. So she's still just kind of like, okay, they're not saying the right words, or this is not what I'm used to, and I'm not hearing it right. So at some point she's like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to push all that aside. They have something, and so I'm going to go for it. So she meets with them the next day, and they pray, and then she just like opens her mouth, and she calls it a beautiful language. Just comes out. It wasn't this like huge emotional thing, but she knew something was different.
Yeah, that experience with that couple was one of the linchpin moments in her ministry, because I can't get into all of it, but essentially Jackie found out that if she would pray in the Spirit, all of a sudden, all of these miraculous things began to happen. After about 6 weeks of her praying in the Spirit, suddenly she's going out on the streets, and instead of people being resistant to the gospel and even resistant to the love that she was showing them, now these people are like ready to receive Jesus. She's giving them the exact same gospel presentation that she's been given for 3 or 4 years, but suddenly, oh my goodness, they want to receive Jesus. They're like, yes, pray with me. Yeah. I want this Jesus. And she started to realize, oh, this is not about my efforts. This is not even about me and my love or me and my service. This is the power of the Holy Spirit. This is what's going to change people's lives. And she also made another crazy discovery, which was that if she would pray with these people, if she'd pray with addicts, heroin addicts, then when they were filled with the Spirit and began to speak in tongues, they were delivered completely painlessly from heroin withdrawals.
Yeah. I think I knew a little bit about what a withdrawal was like, but the way she describes it in here, it's painful, excruciatingly painful.
They could die.
They could die. And some of them, the pain is so bad that they'll, I think she tells a story about one person who had like 4 or 5 people on him. And he's a small dude, but he wanted opium so bad he was able to fight them off. So that's the type of desire, that's the type of pain they're experiencing in their withdrawals of getting off of opium, because heroin, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just the withdrawals were powerfully strong and painful. But she realized, like you said, that if they would start praying in tongues, that God would minister to them in a place where the pain would leave. And they would do their withdrawals without pain at all, without sickness, anything like that. And she even tells stories of some guys who are so stubborn that they will not pray in tongues until the pain gets so excruciating. And then they start praying in tongues, and there's a peace, and there is a something that just comes over them where the pain leaves, and they can sleep. Some guys stay up to like the middle of the night in pain, but once they start praying in tongues and in the Spirit, then the pain goes away and they can sleep and they can rest. And it's just a powerful, there's so many stories in here. It's like story after story after story. It's almost like this happens, and then you're like, let me guess, you're going to tell them to pray in tongues. They pray in tongues, and they get healed miraculously because it wasn't a one-time thing. It really was part of what made her ministry able to do what it did, was that, and people saw it. They were like, people are getting off of, like, even some of the gang leaders were like, my guys are getting off opium. I don't understand this, and so it was just a powerful tool that she had from the Lord that was able to help her do that.
Yeah, one of the things I thought that was really fascinating, she mentioned that, when she would read stories of gang members or drug addicts who had come to Christ, it was almost like they have this moment, and then once they have this conversion moment, everything is just smooth sailing from that point onward. And she began to realize, oh, that must be a total misconception. I'm just reading into something that's not true, because her addicts and her gang members, they would come to Christ in dramatic fashion, and they were new creations, but they weren't new men. They weren't new, mature men. They were just baby Christians. And she said, man, she had so much, she had to put so much effort and time into actually discipling them, because they were a mess, even though they were being filled with the Spirit. There were miraculous signs that these guys were walking in some instances. Like there were words of knowledge, there were words of prophecy, there was interpretation of tongues, and there was a lot of tremendous joy and real life. But they were just a mess still, and she had to walk with them till they actually began living a totally transformed life.
Yeah, I think we have maybe I know before I came to the program, and I think this is the testimony of so many other men, we wanted to be zapped.
Totally.
We wanted the sexual sin just done, just out of our life. And then we could just go on with our life. And I think, that's not how Christianity is supposed to be. There are times where, just like you just said, there are times where there's instantaneous healing, but you gotta walk it out. And she said, talking about these guys, she says this. She says, they could not survive the constant temptations with their meager spiritual knowledge. They had to be out of that environment, but they had to grow and they had to learn. They couldn't just, hey, I got my heroin addiction dealt with. Now I can go off and live a great life.
Yeah, I met Jesus. I'm good to go.
Yeah, exactly. There had to be the everyday living out your faith, and that's what I've had to do. When I went through the program, I'm 16 years out. I'm living more victoriously than I was when I came in the program, but it's been as I've gone, as I've walked, that I'm just walking farther away from that man that I used to be. Walking out my faith, doing mercy, living out what I've seen others do for me. Because when I came in the program, all the staff, they had something that was different and I wanted, and so mimicking how they lived, getting in the Word, just getting my eyes on Christ. That is where, I want to say that's where real victory has come from.
Yeah.
When I came here, I got set on the right path.
Yeah.
But as I continue to walk and grow, it's like all that old me is just not desirable anymore. All the stuff that I used to go for was not desirable anymore.
Yeah.
So. And I think that's, one of the reasons why this is another pivotal moment in her ministry, because she realized that I can't just get these people off of heroin and then send them, because they don't have places to live. The only place to live in the Wall City is in a brothel, in a heroin den, or something like. I have to create an environment for these people to be able to grow. And so she opens up the House of Stephen, I think is what it's called, which is just, she starts bringing people off drugs, and then they live with her, and she starts discipling them, and it grows to the place where she, at one point runs out of space and has to,
open a new house.
And, it's just, and I think that goes against what some of the guys in our program or some people may think who are coming out of any lifestyle of sin is fix my problem and I go back to my old lifestyle. We hear that a lot sometimes in the program. It's just like, fix my problem so I can go back to my life and do what I was doing before. And that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It has to be that the Lord meets them, and then they have to learn how to live a completely different life in a completely different environment. They couldn't live in brothels anymore. Now, here in America, we don't leave sexual sin and go back to brothels. So it's a little bit different, because it's like, okay, what's wrong with being saved and then going back to my house and my family? So there's you see some of that, and but if you look at the influences and what we, especially in America, like media and things like that, we tell guys in the program, you can't go back to living that same way.
That's right.
There has to be a different environment. If you're going home to your wife, your kid, there has to be a different environment in your home. That has to change, because you can't just go back to the same lifestyle you lived before you came out of what you were in.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, yeah, exactly what you're saying, that we can grasp that, that, oh yeah, that's right. So for Jackie to think in terms of, okay, they got zapped, and now they should just be able to go back and live in the walled city with no problem because now they have Jesus, is very naive, right? We would say, man, that's super naive. But yet, the same kind of, we can have the same naivete where we say, I should be able to go back and basically live the exact same kind of life minus sexual sin. And it's just hard to get into our brain, like, no, it's a lot of things about your old life that were producing the kind of environment where sexual sin was so easy. So it's the love of entertainment, and it's the love of comfort, and it's the love of pleasure, and it's, I just want to live the good life. That's what created the whole environment where pornography was so captivating. And that whole thing has to be dismantled. Not saying that you can never enjoy anything, but you can't live the same life and expect a different relationship to pornography, right? Like, you have to say, okay, I am changing my whole life. And she actually says, there was one quote that I thought was really, really good. She said, following Christ is a lifelong decision. And if the brand new believer did not have the basic commitment to change, Christ could not change him. And I thought, man, that is just, I know that probably messes with some theological boxes, but that really brings together the truth that it's Christ's will and Christ's power and my will, and if I'm not committed to change, Jesus isn't going to change me. Because he requires that commitment, he requires that decision. And if people say, well, I want him to do this for me, but leave the rest of my life alone, then in our experience, those people don't change.
Right. This whole book just really takes a stick of dynamite to the American church, really. Just because of how we create this whole structure, and we feel like God has to do this. We have these programs, we have all this, but like, to go even back to the very beginning of our talk, like, one of the things that really got me about this was how everything was just organic, really. She didn't like get a lesson plan and okay, this is going to happen, and go out and do it. It was just, everything happened so organic. And when we have Christ and his will, his desire for us, but then we have to meet that. Josh was praying this morning in staff prayer. He said, Jesus said, come and follow me. That's what it is. Come and follow me. I'm offering you me. I'm offering you eternal life, but you have to come and you have to follow me. And without that, Jesus isn't going to like hog tie us and just drag us. It's that willingness, it's that submission that he's looking for, and what I think obviously he found in Jackie, to be able to send her into this darkness and use her like he did.
And that actually, if Jesus does do any dragging, I almost want to say like, what he's looking for a willing decision that we choose to surrender. That's what he's looking for. And what he will use, he absolutely will use it. And you see it in this book. We see it in our own lives. He will use the pain of sin and the pain of our own destructive consequences to try to get us to yield. Like, are you done yet? Because this is what life is like when you just do your own thing. And this is how it will always be. If you keep doing your own thing, the only thing you have to look forward to is frustration, misery, and pain. all he's looking for through that is, would you please just repent?
Yeah.
Once you will repent and yield and surrender, then okay, yeah, there's still going to be difficulty, but the pain of sin, like just the misery of sin is not going to be the overarching feature of your life.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about this book. It's like, here in America, the pain that we're talking about, these people were experiencing pain and destructiveness of their choices of like getting arrested or getting beat up by another gang or their body deteriorating from the heroin and opium they're taking. We may not experience that. A quote unquote professing believer may not experience getting arrested but if you really get real with yourself and just take stock for a moment, what I have right now, like, does not satisfy. And that's the same thing they were going through. They were trying to fill themselves with opium, with crime, to fulfill this desire that they had inside of themselves. I think she talks about it. Some of the kids just wanted respect and and to be loved. And so they went to gangs. That's what it was. Somebody has his wife dies. He can't handle it. He goes to opium. What do we go to when something hard happens in our life? We may not go to opium. We might go to porn. Yep. I know we went to porn. That's what we went to. Some people might go to movies. Some people might go to alcohol. Yeah. Some people might go to all these different, video games. Apps on your career. Yeah. I'm feeling horrible, so I have to find something inside of me or something out in this world that's going to fulfill me. And if we're not looking for it in Jesus and in God, it's not going to be there. He says in the word, I am your life in Deuteronomy. I am your life and your length of days. I am that.
Yeah.
So if it's not in him, you don't have life. And I think that the people of the walled city found that out through Jackie. And I think Jackie probably found that out too. Mm-hmm. Because like we said before, she went through that whole period of giving herself to the things of this world. Mm-hmm. But when she gave herself to the Lord's will and to the Lord, she found life, even though it was hard and there were still difficulties. She had a joy and she had a love for these people that went beyond that. And I can't tell you how many times in this book she will talk to somebody and they'll start praying in tongues. It's a prisoner or whatever. She says, I go back 3 months later and they're like, I have so much joy. I have so much peace. They're in prison. I have so much joy, Jackie. I have so much peace. I'm filled with joy. You're like, they're in prison. They're in prison for 30 years. They're in prison for 10 months, whatever it is. They have joy because they found Jesus. Yeah. And it wasn't in all this other stuff that they were looking for it in.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think our time is up, but again, we would just very much recommend that you read Chasing the Dragon by Jackie Pullinger. Yeah. It's available on Amazon. And once you do, leave a comment on this episode and let us know what you thought about it, because it's amazing.
Yep.
All right. Thank you to the Joshes for coming.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, that's it for today's episode. And before we go, I have some really good news. We're right in the middle of developing a new series for couples. It's called On the Same Team. We have had so many couples come through our programs, and the fact is, the couples that end up with strong, victorious, life-filled marriages, they all have something in common, which is this. Both spouses are determined to have a strong, vibrant walk with God, and they're both willing to do whatever it takes to help their spouse live a victorious life in Christ. So, we lined up 6 couples to talk about what they've done to have a close walk with Jesus and what they've done to help each other. And I'm telling you, their stories are so powerful. Each one of their marriages were utterly destroyed by sexual sin, and each of them have been miraculously restored by the power of God and by their determination to be on the same team. You are not going to want to miss this series. So please bear with us. We've got a lot of work to do on the back end to get that series out to you guys. In the meantime, we're going to have to use a couple of replays. But the first episode for the new series is going to drop, Lord willing, on September 30th. So please be on the lookout for that. All right, God bless. We'll see you next time.